Hello and welcome to Scatterbrain Coaching. I am a positive psychology ADHD coach, and so my view on ADHD is that it is simply different brain wiring, and that has different effects. You think differently, you feel differently, and you behave differently. To explain it a little bit further, I want to use the metaphor of the hunter and farmer and why they are different and why they need to be different. So I'm going to share my screen. So here we are, the hunter versus the farmer. Now, the hunter is, let me just move this a little bit. Okay, the hunter, well, they need to be different. How would you imagine you can have a farmer that works in a hunter way? So, the hunter, he sleeps, he just rests for a long period of time, and then he gears himself up for the hunt. He goes and he sort of gets everything ready, he psychs himself up, he goes sprinting up, and he finds a herd and he kills a beast, and he deals with the whole thing and then goes back and then rests again. Now that sort of thing doesn't work for a farmer, does it? And vice versa. You can't have the slow, steady pace if you're a hunter. You need to have that real boost of energy. Hello and welcome again. This one, we're going to be talking about focusing and why that is different for farmers and hunters. So let me share my screen. Here we are. Oh, next slide would be good. Here we go. Focus. So what is a different way of focusing? Well, you can either pay attention to details, to a sequence of events and sequence of necessary actions, or you can pay attention to everything around you. Now, if you think about it, if you're a hunter, you need to pay attention to everything around you. You need to scan for danger. You need to see if there's a predator hunting you. You need to know if there's prey around. You need to know if the prey suddenly scatters because there's another predator around. You need to know when the typical prey has started moving a different direction. You need to know if the weather is going to change. All those things you need to know. So you're forever scanning around. Whereas if you're a farmer, well, farmers, what do they do? They have to pay attention to the sowing, to the slow, steady looking after the plants, the weeding, the checking the crops, the watering it, sort of the real sequence of events. They need to know to deal with those tiny details. They don't want to get distracted all the time, because if they're distracted, they're not going to deal with their job. So they are different. So in that same way, if you have neurotypicals, they don't get distracted easily. They're ideal for the sort of jobs that need a steady pace. That the typical 9 to 5 is perfect for neurotypicals, because they go there, they have a steady rhythm all the way through the day, they know what they're doing, and then they're finishing and they're going home. Whereas the ADHDers, we need change. We are forever looking at everything around us. So our perfect jobs are either the ones that have lots of change happening, or the ones that depend on emergencies, so emergency workers. In that time, everything slows down for us. We can deal with everything at that time because we are so in that moment. And that is the way that ADHDers and neurotypicals, their brain wiring affects the way they behave, the way they focus. Thank you for being part of this. Welcome again. So this one is all about energy and how our energy flows differently. So let me share my screen again. So energy. When you think about typical jobs, the typical jobs that most of us are expected to do, so the ones that are really designed for neurotypicals, they're all slow, sustained energy jobs. Because if you think about farmers, they need to do this slow, sustained effort. If you're a farmer, you need to be able to deal from sun up to sundown with one thing after another, just working your way through to steady jobs till the end. That is what you need to do. A hunter, however, like I said before, a hunter, what do? They go and psych themselves up, get really excited, like go, and they're like ready, and all this energy is flowing through them, and then they put so much energy into the hunt. It's just massive. And then they deal with it, and they kill, and they deal with the meat, and they crash. That's what it's like. And that is the way ADHDers work. So our problem tends to be that we think that the energy, so the amount of work we can do when we're in this top bit of our energy, that we should be able to do that all the time. And of course, that's never going to work because we squeeze all the energy into a small piece of time. But it's still the same amount of energy that a neurotypical would use over a whole day. And that energy is the same. And that means that to expect us, and we tend to do this to ourselves, to expect us to work at that intense pace all the time, it means that there's not going to be any energy left over for anything else. So this is why so many of us, I've done it myself, we're in a job all day, we go this tremendous speed, this real focused energy, and then at the end of the day, we get home and we totally crash. There's no energy to do anything. We don't go out, we don't do housework, we don't enjoy ourselves, we just can't do anything. I was in a teaching job, and every single holiday, I would just crash. Other people would go on holiday and have a great time. I would just crash. I would not be able to do anything. And that was every single holiday. Whereas neurotypical people, because they do this slow, steady effort, they get home, they rest a little bit, and then they're fine to do all sorts of other stuff. So what we need to know, what we need to be aware of, is that when we work, when we do this intense energy thing, we need to build in the crash during that day, that period of less energy. Because if we don't, we're going to burn out, break down, get overwhelmed. Hello and welcome. So this one is all about time because, well, you know us. We're always late or early. I'm the one that's always early. I'm usually about an hour early at the absolute minimum. And so that means that I sit somewhere and I've learned to take a book with me because otherwise, what do? I'll just waste time. So other people, other ADHDers are often can be late, but it's part of the same thing. It's part of having a different relationship with time. Time is not linear. So let me share my screen and let's go into this. Time. So if you think about farmers, well, farmers need to think in a linear way, because if they don't think in a linear way, they don't know when it's time to sow the seeds. They don't know when it's time to water the plants. They don't know when it's time to do the weeding, the time to do the harvesting. You can see I'm already struggling with this whole sequence thing myself. And then they need to deal with the harvest. So they need to think in a linear way. Whereas for the hunter, time is sort of elastic. So sometimes time can be so slow, so incredibly slow. For example, if we do something that's boring, I know this goes for everyone, but for us, it goes extra strong. Time is incredibly slow. Whereas in an emergency, or the equivalent of the hunt, in a hunt, time slows down, time stretches. And suddenly we can get so much done in that period of time. This is why ADHDers are extremely good in emergency situations, because they will have thought through everything, dealt with the most important things, and just panic doesn't get a look in. It may be later, but not at that time. We just deal with it immediately, done. But again, it has effects, because our society is a neurotypical society and depends on a linear time. We have time scales. We have times we need to be somewhere. We have times that we have to be in a meeting or at school, or and then there's things like birthdays. Remembering birthdays is a real feat. So all this stuff is due to this whole concept of not having this sort of time. We don't have linear time. Okay, hello and welcome. I want you to think for a moment. When you think back to something a long time ago, and so you're trying to remember something, how do you remember it? Do you remember it as a story? Do you remember it as a combination of things stuck together? Do you remember it as a visual, so either a picture or a film? How do you remember it? And this one is particularly interesting because not all ADHDers are visual and not all neurotypicals are auditory. But let me share my screen and talk a little bit further about this. So if you think about it in terms of farmers and hunters again, farmers, they live in communities. What is the most important thing for them is communication. So it's talking. So they're auditory thinkers. They think in language because they need it to communicate with each other. Whereas hunters, they think in connections, in patterns, in pictures, in landscapes. Now, when you think in that way, and then you're trying to explain something with language, it means you have to translate that picture into language. Sometimes that's not that easy. So sometimes we get stuck in the words. We can forget some words. We can't come up with it because we're seeing it, but we're not having the word to describe it. This has an effect, particularly when you think about school. So where ADHDers often find it difficult to learn something, it may simply be because of the way they're taught to take notes. Written notes may not mean anything. Visual notes may mean something. For me personally, I have to write and draw a lot of notes, but I never look at it again. It's the act of doing it. So for me, it's more about the actual act of writing something down. And mine tends to be words and arrows and pictures and everything together. But it's important to realize this if you're in a conversation, an ADHDer and a non-ADHDer, and you have this conversation, and the non-ADHDer thinks in language and can really articulate themselves really clearly. And the ADHD would love to do that, but struggles. It doesn't mean they don't know what they're talking about. It means at that moment they haven't got the words. Okay, hello and welcome. And this one is particularly close to my heart because I think this one in relationships causes a big, big problem. So let me share my screen and we shall see what it is that causes this big difference, big problem. Okay, if you think about farmers think in groups. Farmers are team players. They think community. And they need to, because farmers have to help each other. You can't deal with everything on a farm on your own. You need to work in a group. And that is how they stay safe, and that how they live, how they manage to keep living. Hunters, however, we're solitary creatures. It doesn't mean we don't like socializing, but hunters have to think of themselves first, because if they don't keep themselves as being the person they think of first, then they're dead. That's the basic thing to think about it. So if a hunter doesn't always make sure they are safe, they can't help anyone else. It's a bit like when you're in an airplane. You know how there's this thing that if there's an emergency, your oxygen mask will come down, and make sure you deal with your own first before you do your children. It's that sort of thing. You need to do yourself first. Now, what this means, however, is that this is the way we think. And so it can come across as us being selfish. It's not. We are not selfish. We do think of everyone else. But at first thought, we will think of us. So if you tell an ADHD, if you tell us, for example, that, oh, you're going to go on holiday, our first thought is probably not, oh, that's nice, where are you going? It's probably, oh, I'm going on holiday too. But it doesn't mean that we're selfish. It means that that's our first thought. And then we could say, oh yeah, I'm going to go to Morocco. Where are you going? And then we start in this conversation. But for the neurotypical, so for the farmer, it can feel like we don't care, like we're only thinking about us. And there's other examples. For example, I go in and visit someone, okay? I go and visit someone, dinner is served, we're all having these wonderful conversations, and I'm deep in conversation, and the host is doing the clearing up of the table. It will never occur to me to get up and help clear the table, because I'm in a conversation with someone else. At that moment, this conversation I'm having is more important. But for a neurotypical person, they would immediately think community, group thinking. Oh, let me help you with that first, and then afterwards maybe go back to the conversation. Whereas if we try to do that, we go and help first, then we'll have forgotten the conversation. And that's also part of it. We need to say things immediately, because if we don't, it's gone. Okay. Thank you for this one. I will stop sharing and go to the next. Hello and welcome again. Okay, this one is about predictability. So this is about routines, habits, all of that sort of stuff. And this is one of those things that, well, you know, ADHDs are really not very good at habits. We don't really remember to do those things. So let me share my screen and let's go and look at the why. let's go back to farmers. Okay, well, farmers, they have things they need to do every single day, and it's often exactly the same thing. Farmers, they need to go and look after their flocks. They need to go and check the crops. They need to go and water the crops. They need to go and feed their animals. And it's the same thing every day. So they crave routine and structure because that is what gives them their sense of safety, their sense of success. Hunters, however, they have to be very flexible. They can change strategy in the moment's notice because you're walking, you're hunting, you see something, you've got to react to it. Whether it's a threat or it's someone you hunt, you have to react to it. So we're terrible when we get bored. We need change. We're very good in emergencies. But on the other hand, we do need some sort of structure because otherwise we're going to be like the hunter who doesn't have a hunt. So, and we do live in a neurotypical society. So without the structure imposed on us, some sort of structure, we just bounce from one thing to another. So even though we don't like structure, we do need some structure. It just depends how. Hello and welcome. Okay, this one is about sensitivities. Most ADHDers will have been told we're too much of something. We're too sensitive. We are too loud as well and too intense, but we're too sensitive. So let me share my screen. Here we go. Now think about it again. If you're a farmer, you need to just focus on your job that you're doing. There's a community of you, there's a group. So there's people whose job it is to keep you safe. For the rest, you just need to focus on your work. You need to get on with it and deal with it before the harvest is ruined. The hunter is on his own. Needs to know everything around him. Needs to know if there's a little crackle of someone stepping on a twig. Needs to know if the birds suddenly stop. Needs to know if the air pressure changes because it might mean there's a storm coming. Needs to be that extremely sensitive. So where neurotypical people can shut things out. So for example, there's a noise going on around you, okay? The clock is ticking. Most neurotypical people, after a little while, they don't notice the clock ticking. I bet you the ADHD will hear that clock ticking continuously. And so that's not just with the clock ticking. It is with the air conditioning. It is with the heater. It is with extreme light. We're more sensitive to bright lights, maybe. It's with, the label in the back of your jumper. Can't bear it. Ooh. Or that seam on the front of your socks. We are extremely sensitive. We're also extremely sensitive to emotions. And this is one that I think is not often realized enough. I would say that emotions and having intense emotions and having difficulty in regulating this is actually the #1 characteristic of ADHDers. I might go into this in another course soon. So a little bit at the end now is that this was a very brief introduction, and it was meant to be a brief introduction. What I would like you to do is to really think about this and use it as a language to communicate with other people, whether they're ADHDers or non-ADHDers, because this is not a clear-cut thing. Not all ADHDers fit with the hunter with everything. and not all non-ADHD is fit with a farmer with everything. So having this conversation and talking together and really thinking about, where am I on this? With time, where am I? Am I on, um, am I more of a hunter with this or am I more of a farmer with this? What about with processing? How do I process things? Do I process things visually or do I process them auditorially? Um, where am I in the thinking? Am I more a community person or am I more a single person? And remember, it doesn't mean you're not social. It just means what you think of first. Okay, so thank you very much for watching this, and I hope to see you again at some other course. Okay.